Hello everybody and welcome back. Thank you very much for joining me. Tonight we're back on home turf as we go to Scotland, to Dundee, 1995, 2005 for Mr. Luke's Dundee Bigfoot and the Tayside creature reports. Now, many years ago when I started the British Bigfoot research team, I was asked by the American TV show Finding Bigfoot to provide some of the witness reports collected here by myself and the other BBR team members. In doing so, I was lucky enough to receive some reports from the Finding Bigfoot team that were new to me as they were sent to the American researchers due to the lack of interest really here in the UK. At the time, I think there was only BBR and one other Bigfoot group called Bigfoot UK that was actively looking for witnesses to Bigfoot-like creatures here in Great Britain, Scotland, Ireland and Wales. And the first account I received was sent over to me by Cliff Barrettman and the BRFO, and many of you will know Cliff. And he'd received it from a gentleman himself who saw a Bigfoot-like creature close to the River Tay in 2005 and just didn't know where to report it to. So in a very beautiful part of Scotland, less than a mile from the Tay estuary and close to the A92 at the Five Roads roundabout, and people from that area of the country will know the Five Roads roundabout, a gentleman who was driving this road on his way home from work encountered a strange, hairy, human-type figure he could not explain. Bordered by thickets and foliage on both sides of the road, the witness was proceeding down the road as he had done many times before. Now, this is his account in his own words. After navigating the Five Roads roundabout, I was driving home southbound on the A92 when my headlights picked out what I thought was a man standing by the left-hand side of the road. I could see his figure clearly, and as I approached, he stepped out in front of my car. And I naturally brought the car to a halt to avoid hitting the individual. But on looking at the figure, I realised this was not a person in the usual sense of the word. This person was a large, hairy, ape-like creature, which turned to look at the car as I approached. Its eyes gave out a shine, which was very noticeable, and it crossed the road in about 3 large strides, moving with ease. I felt uneasy, but I brought the car to a stop and I put the window down so I could listen as it left. I could hear something crunching away in the woods there, as if something was clearly moving through the forest. I had no torch with me to shine towards the sound. I did notice, however, that there was a very unpleasant odour in the air, and suddenly I got the feeling I was being watched, as everything went very quiet. Silence all around me. It was very unnerving. I then shockingly just continued home as if nothing had happened. I didn't even realise I had started to drive, as if I was on autopilot, and I didn't stop until I reached my home. Thinking back to the day and trying to explain what this thing looked like is a pretty impossible feat, but the witness did try his best to do that and give a detailed description. Now, this individual was well over 7 feet tall and was a dark brown colour, he said. Its hair was of a reasonable length and all one colour. I've never seen this creature again anywhere in Scotland, and I only confided in my partner at the time. I thought these creatures existed in other areas in the world, but not here. I know unequivocally what I saw, and it's still clear in my mind as if it happened yesterday. There are rumours of sheep and cattle disturbances in the area. I have heard of no sightings of a large hairy creature in that area or Scotland for that matter. I worked as a civil servant for many years and I've experienced some crazy stuff, but I must admit that this was a big surprise. I wonder if this gentleman knows now about all the encounters surrounding his own, and that in contacting the newspaper it did bring forward another gentleman who was so scared by his encounter 10 years earlier. It scared him so much he'd been struggling with it for all those years on his own. And if you're out there, if you are the gentleman in question, please get in touch. It would be lovely to speak to you. Now, Mark Luke was a gentleman who heard the first account and came forward with his own from 1995. And Mr. Luke was 46 when he made this report. And he's from Edinburgh, and he broke his silence for the first time after struggling to come to terms with what happened to him when he was out driving for over a decade. He finally spoke up to his mother about his experience 10 years earlier when he saw a Bigfoot roaming the Fife countryside. After reading about a similar experience in the Courier, Mr. Luke's mother persuaded him to come forward. Mr. Luke, who is a carer, said he spotted the tall, hairy, upright figure just off the Tay Road Bridge in 1995 whilst travelling to Dundee to fill in for a night shift security cover. His sighting happened in the same area that a former civil servant from Fife reported seeing a creature at the Five Roads roundabout when he was driving home from work. Just like Mr. Luke, the civil servant had also told nobody at the time and only spoke publicly about what happened some years later. Now, Mr. Luke said, I had a similar encounter driving back to Edinburgh from a night shift security in Dundee. It was about 8 a.m. and I was on the A92 road driving south in the same rough area close to the Five Roads roundabout. I can remember there was a thick forest on both sides of me, and I looked to my left to see a tall, dark shape standing about 20 feet away in the trees. Mr. Luke stated, at first, I thought it was an ordinary man. But then, as it came towards me, I could clearly see it was not a man. He must have been huge, some 8 to 10 feet tall, and really wide, it would seem at the time. I was quite scared and confused, to be honest. I put my foot down without thinking and just carried on driving. I was doing about 60 miles an hour, and I was not going back to look, and I was not stopping until he was far behind me. It was dark under those trees, so it was very hard to see into the woods. I could see a shape, but no facial details. I only told my mother after reading the story in the Courier, and she encouraged me to come forward and share what happened. Mr. Luke said, I'm 90% sure that they are out there. I won't ever be 100% sure. Even seeing one of them with our own eyes does not make it seem possible. There's just too many unexplained things still out there. Now, there are many other Bigfoot and Wildman accounts that follow the River Tay west, passing Ween, where we have some of the oldest accounts. One very interesting report is of a leaping dark creature in an area called Ailth, and it was reported to my team member Charmaine. And this is a report I was sent. Charmaine says, this is a report I was sent regarding a possible sighting on my side of the border. I consequently went and investigated the area. A structure was found, and around the same spot the creature was sighted, stated Charmaine Fraser. I just wanted to contact you to tell you about the sighting my wife had on Sunday evening at 7:30 p.m. whilst we were driving along a wooded section of the A926 near Ailth, heading towards Kirriemoor. I was driving and I didn't see anything, but my wife in the back was looking out of the windows as we drove along at the views, and she suddenly said, "Did you see that?" She then went on to explain she saw something a distance ahead on the verge of the road within the dense woodland that she initially thought was a man walking. But the man did a very strange movement as it leaped forward into the wood very quickly and stopped stock still. My wife said it looked black like a shadow and it was tall and wide. She said she got the impression it was about to cross the road and then leapt deeper into the wood upon hearing the car approaching. She was a bit shaken up and said her hair felt like it was standing up on end. And I probably would have turned the car around and had a look myself if it was just me and my wife in the car. But my auntie was in the car and had been woken by the commotion and was not impressed. My wife has considered other logical, normal reasons, such as a deer or a hiker, to explain what she saw that day, hoping it may just have been an optical illusion that made something normal seem so unusual. But I thought I would tell you about it, as I understand you are researching the phenomenon. Now, if we head north along the east coast, we meet up with the accounts of a ginger-haired Bigfoot in the forest of Carmyleel. Charmaine Fraser was a witness to that. or south towards the town of Portas Bray, we pick up another line of sighting reports that seems to be heading southwest towards the town of Stirling and south to Edinburgh. Portas Bray, Bray being a hill or a small mountain, is just to the south of Dundee and the accounts that we were discussing earlier. And there's a very similar report of a hairy upright biped by a gentleman using a lay-by on the road one evening. Now, the account was taken, as I said, by Charmaine Fraser, and she is a leading Scottish researcher and witness to the Bigfoot creatures at Carmy Hill. She spoke to the witnesses and visited the areas of each report, and here is the gentleman's account in his own words. Reported by the witness to Charmaine Fraser, January 2015. The incident occurred around 1970. I know that's a while ago now, but I've never forgotten about the event, so even now I'm confident about what happened and what I saw. About 45 years ago, I was with my then girlfriend and we were parked on a forestry road at the junction of Dundee Bray and Portas Bray on the road to Cults. Now, the area is heavily wooded with lots of thick forests and is an area used for forestry and logging. Now, this junction we were parked up in is about 1.5 miles from Kenaway in Fife. I was parked about 300 yards up the Tayside forestry road, and all the trees to the left of me had been cut down. And for about 50 yards between the road and the trees, that had been clear cut, and the floor was cleared right up to the tree line and stacked up at the side of the forestry road. There was a full moon, and you could see right across the clearing into the standing trees. My then girlfriend said she saw something moving in the clearance, to which I said it would no doubt be a fox or a deer and not to worry too much about it. After a while, I fell asleep on the back seat until my girlfriend shook me awake and said there was something moving behind the stacked trees next to the car. It was the same thing she saw earlier, but now it was much closer than before. It had been moving around us for a while now while I slept. Thinking it was an everyday woodland creature, I wound the window down and banged on the door to move it off, but the creature, or whatever it was completely unfazed. It's never even moved. I then jumped into the driver's seat and reversed the car so the headlights shone in the direction of this creature. And to my shock and amazement, the creature stood up straight, and for a second or two I could see it clearly. This thing was stood around 8 feet tall and had a white grey chest and face, and the rest of its body was black. It looked at us one last time, and then it took off in the direction of the forest and vanished from sight. We were both confused, and we were just sat there trying to think what it could be. And then it came back. This thing started throwing sticks at the car, and they weren't little sticks, as you could hear them hitting the car with a thud. We heard crashing noises going through a line of young beech trees near the car. We just drove out of there, and my girlfriend did not want to return. So I went back to check things out in the daylight, and I wanted to go and see if there was anything. So the next day I went back there with my brother. I went to look for tracks or signs, but it had been raining, and we found nothing. I later asked a man I know who's worked all his life in these forests if he knew anything about what we saw, but he'd never come across anything like what it was. Now, I was lucky enough last year to visit an area very similar to the areas mentioned here and not too many miles away. And we stayed along the River Tay with a number of team members after visiting one of our favourite witnesses, Isabella, who lives much further north. On a visit to the woodlands in the early hours of the morning was very unnerving. In the daytime itself, it was impossible to see into the forest as the trees were so thickly packed in there. The area is also very difficult to walk in, even for the able-bodied members, so we had to stick to the logging trails. We did find a number of animal skeletons picked clean, lying around in different areas on the trails. On leaving the forest and returning to the car, we were very shocked to see a number of these bones placed next to the car. If that was not disconcerting enough, one of the legs that was left was fresh and still bloody. It was very fresh, and there was no sign of decay at all. All the hair, skin and hooves were intact, and the leg bone was broken mid-joint. A number of team members did see a very dark, low-down animal that resembled a wolf or a very large fox, which was grey in colour, cross the road very quickly. But in the dim light, it was impossible to make out much in the forest there. Due to my walking problems, I stayed put. I was sat on a number of logs while my fellow researchers went up exploring. And I can honestly say, for all it was magical out there in the gloaming, with not a sound other than the dog chorus, it was also very spooky. Walking past the tree line makes you realise just how dark it is within the trees below the thick canopy. When we turned our torches off, it was impossible to see. I felt watched constantly, and it was only on reaching the car that I realised I'd been holding my breath for most of the visit. There was a very strange moment there, other than the bloody deer leg. When I was sat alone, I could hear feet walking below me off the steep bankside of the logging road. And to be honest, I thought it was a particular team member who likes to play the odd prank. So I waited as I heard him, or what I thought was him, transperse around me from below. I could hear his feet crunching on the shale and then on the twigs and branches as he looped around me and went up onto the next logging road above me. And it was at that moment that my team members started to walk back, and they walked back in from 3 completely opposite directions, but they were all out in front of me. And then I realised it could not possibly be any of the team. And one of the team who was walking back asked me who was above me as he saw a quick, fleeting glance of the dark figure. Now, it could have been a fellow lover of the woods or an early hiker, perhaps, but I can't answer that. But I can tell you, for a split second there, I wished I could run. I was absolutely terrified. Would I go back? Yeah, no doubt. But I'm often found in places most people avoid, such is life of a researcher, and that's what it is. But here's that strange deer leg. Now, other people will have heard me speak about this before. It was about, at this point, I think it was about 5:30 a.m. And you can see the blood there. It was still wet. This end was still wet. And there was no smell to it, no sign of decay, nothing. It was absolutely perfect. And it was just lay there. Now, it could have been a dog. Chris Turner said, yeah, it could have been a dog walker. We didn't see anyone while we were in there. Another strange thing, when we were going in, I noticed a dead deer on the railway line. It was just lay there, it was dead. And as we came back, it wasn't there anymore. And that was just something else that I noticed of interest. But it is a really strange area. So there are a number of reports there, and that is only a little bit of what's actually there. I've really condensed it down. So I hope you enjoyed that. Some people seem to like these videos better. Apparently the audio is better. So if it's okay with you guys, I'm going to stick with this way for a while, because it enables me to show you finds and things like that. I have lots of finds of evidence, footprints and hairs and all kinds of things that you've never seen before. So at least doing it this way, you'll be able to see them. And it helps for people who don't visit the website, because this is basically all I'm working on. This is my draft for our website. I'll just show you it here, actually. I might be interested in... oh, no, actually, I can't leave, sorry. But there, Deborah Hatswell, Bigfoot sightings. Pop that in and pop across and have a look and see what you think and give the articles a share. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much and good night.